Are you tired of the cookie-cutter approach to education that's stuck in the last century? Are you seeking a win-win situation where your family thrives, your kid's education is revolutionary, and you still get to chase your own dreams? Welcome to Unschooled Unleashed. Unlock your child's genius. I'm your host, Matthew Jarecki, an unapologetic rebel dad and promoter of what many consider to be educational anarchy. You know the world isn't going to be won by those that just toe the line. It's the innovators, the visionaries, and the resilient spirits that are going to thrive. Our mission here is to forge those world changers within our very homes with less stress, energy, and time. Unschooled Unleashed starts now. Welcome back to another fantastic episode of Unschooled Unleashed. I'm your host, Matthew Jarecki, and today we're going to talk about something that most unschoolers think is a dirty word, and that word is curriculum. I believe curriculum has a role, and I'm going to tell you where that role might be in unschooling, as I see it. We don't use a curriculum currently, but I'm exploring options, so I wanted to share with you where my head's at with it. And it's not exactly, we're not going to use it exactly how you might think. The rest of the world, meaning in schools, they use a very rigid curriculum. And the way they use it, I think, is harmful to kids. I do not think it's supporting their education. And I'll kind of go through that. A little personal note on the family side, where weather's got us down. It's been snowing and it's been super cold, so our box truck that we're converting to an RV is a lot of the projects on the outside are on hold. So we moved to the inside. We're doing some stuff, but still moving forward. My wife just got a promotion at her job, and this promotion allows her to partly work from home. I think that's fantastic news because we were very clear that we want to get fully remote, and that takes 2 promotions. She's only been there a little over a year. So our goal is to get her fully remote by the end of February. We'll see if that actually happens. It's really before the box truck gets finished into the RV. But having the ability to at least be partially remote is a step in the right direction. That gives us a lot of options. So we're celebrating that. We're also celebrating a victory for my alma mater, Ohio State. The Ohio State Buckeyes won the national championship for college football. They beat Notre Dame, and I'm super excited. So I'm actually recording this podcast, and then I'm headed straight down to Columbus, and we're going to go down to the stadium. We call it the Shoe, with over 100,000 other people, and celebrate the Buckeyes championship. So I'm getting together with some college friends. We're going to make it a great weekend. So I'm pretty excited. I'm in a good mood. With that, let's dive in. Today we're going to explore how curriculum can play a role in intentional unschooling. We're going to explore the dangers of forced learning and how to inspire children to pursue their education at their own pace. And the purpose of today's show is to really show you how curriculum can be a supportive tool rather than a rigid framework, which is how we normally view it. Instead, helping children explore topics they are genuinely interested in without the pressure of being forced to learn like they do in a rigid curriculum. I think a curriculum can be a valuable tool. I know in my own personal life, and I don't want to get into it too much because I'm going to talk about it throughout, but when I was forced to learn something, I did not, 1, retain it. 2, it took away all my energy for stuff that I was actually interested in because I had to do something that I was not interested in. 3, I saw no purpose in it, which meant I thought it was an absolute waste of time, made me hate the topic. I mean, like, despise topics that I was forced to learn, and all for the benefit of what? For maybe exposure, because that's arguably the best thing I can think of as far as forcing your kid to learn something they cannot stand, that they're adamantly opposed to learning, because they're not going to retain it. It's going to take a lot of your energy, their energy, to actually get it done. And what happens? They don't remember it anyway. There's kids graduating high school without being able to read or write in the United States. So not that they don't need those. Don't think I'm arguing that. What I'm arguing is curriculum isn't the enemy, but we're doing it wrong. Okay? So let's dive in. Why curriculum isn't the enemy. Curriculum can be a valuable resource for structured learning. I think this is very valuable. Structured learning provides us a very easy path to learn something. So when used intentionally, it can efficiently guide children through topics that they are passionate about. And I just think of my own kids where they're fascinated by maybe space, learning about the planets, learning about math, these types of things. It's very helpful for them to have something to be able to walk through that engages them. It's the most efficient way to do it because they are being walked through with someone who already has been down that path of learning. There's so much value to exploring out there and just bouncing around and looking at stuff, but there's also value in a structured way to learn something, in my opinion. What I am against, and again, I want to make this a differentiation very clear. I support unschooling and child-led interest-based learning, right? That's what I'm saying. But which usually people think is against curriculum because it's against a forced curriculum. But I support curriculums if they support the children's learning. I think with intentional unschooling, you can go back and listen to an episode that defines that out if you like. But with intentional unschooling, we're to provide our kids exposure and a ton of resources to be able to learn whatever they're choosing to learn. That's where curriculum can fall in. So what are the harmful effects of forced learning when you use a rigid curriculum, when these so-called experts say, this is when you should learn something, and then we force our kids to do it, like in every public school out there? Well, forced curriculum can create resentment towards the subject, like I've said I've experienced, like I see other kids experiencing when I talk to them. Hey, do you like school? What are you learning about? No, I don't like school. No, I hate math. No, I hate reading. This is why this happens, because we force kids to do it. They don't see the value behind it. They don't see the benefit. They're not interested in it. We got to get them interested, guys. It often damages the child's confidence, making them feel behind or incapable as well. You got kids who get it right away and they're bored, or you got kids who don't get it right away and they feel like they're behind and they start giving them labels. I am not a fan of this because who says that you need to learn Ohio history in 5th grade? The state. And who's the state? Nobody. It's just an opinion of some quote-unquote expert that says your kid needs to learn Ohio history in 5th grade. And if they don't do it, they're behind. It's arbitrary. I learned Ohio history as an adult. Even though I went through the class, I didn't retain anything. I remember 2 things. That's it. I remember the state bird of Ohio, which is the cardinal, and the state flower, I believe, is the carnation. Could be wrong about that. That's what I learned. And we spent an entire year learning about that, or semester. I'm not quite sure. It was 5th grade. It was a long time ago. But I remember specifically having to learn all this stuff, and I lost it all. You know, arguably the exposure is great, but not at the expense of despising a topic, right? Moving on, the importance of timing and interest-based learning, or timing and interest in learning. Children learn best when they are genuinely curious about a topic. That's why I unschool. Because when you get them interested, you will be able to learn so fast. Or I say you, the kids will be able to learn so fast. It's just like you put something on paper, you know, for example, math, that's what we're into. And they just pick it up, and we can move through math so fast when they're genuinely interested. I don't have to coax them. I don't have to force them. I don't have to punish them. It doesn't take my energy. It's actually life-giving because I see my kids growing, which is something that I genuinely want, and they want to grow themselves, and they see the value in it. So I put a lot of my energy into showing how math is important, how math can get them ahead. I use math as a roadblock at times to something that they want, because I'm not going to just do the math for them. For example, if they want to spend money, they have to learn the math behind budgeting. And I'm not going to, I'll teach them how to do it, but if they don't do it, they can't spend their money and get whatever they were looking for. They have to actually do the math. that has to be coupled with something that points out how valuable it is and how it can be fun and engaging. And if you force them again, they're going to start to hate it. So this is more for, I shouldn't say it's more for younger children, but it's worked with younger children. My oldest is 11, and this has all worked up until then. I think teens are probably a tad different, but I'll get there when I get there. Retention is higher when a learner aligns with interests rather than an arbitrary age-based standard, which is what schools do. If you're interested in something, I think we should dive into it. Again, it's the most efficient way. It doesn't require as much of your energy. It doesn't require as much of the kids' energy, and they retain it better. What better scenario can happen? A hypothetical scenario is a child who develops an interest in history at 15 could grasp the subject way more deeply than if forced to learn it at 10. Because of all this. Let me back up these hypothetical examples sometimes. Let me give you a personal example. I talk about this quite a bit. I learned math from the end of 5th grade, so 6th, 7th, and 8th grade math. I learned it all in 3 weeks. That's a week per grade. I did this in the evenings and on the weekends because all of a sudden I got motivated to learn when I found out I had to go over and pass a standardized test. And I thought I was going to fail because I hadn't done any math since 5th grade. And I thought I was bad at it because they forced me to learn it. And they didn't give me the help that I needed. And why are we sending kids to school if they're not getting the help they need? It's beyond me. Anyways, I ended up hating it, but all of a sudden I saw a reason to do it. I wanted to graduate high school. I wasn't going to let this hold me back. I wanted a future. So therefore I learned it. It was just a hurdle to jump through at that point. I didn't see the value in actually learning it. Some of the stuff that I did learn, I don't see the value in. Some of the stuff, definitely valuable. But as soon as I was motivated, we got real serious and we moved like lightning. And I got some help from my dad, and I spent a lot of time in a textbook. Moving on. Flexibility of intentional unschooling. Intentional unschooling allows children to set the pace and direction of their learning. I think it focuses on the process rather than rigid outcomes like grades or age benchmarks, stuff like that. And I think this approach nurtures a lifelong skill for it gives them critical thinking and problem-solving abilities because they are engaged and they are trying to learn and they are trying to jump through hurdles on their own. It's this intrinsic motivation. And when we force them into schools or this rigid curriculum, we even do this in homeschooling. I say we. People who do home education do school at home. They do a forced rigid curriculum that they have milestones that they have to do at a certain time. And if they don't do it, they're behind, and they force the kid and they force the kid and they force the kid. Everyone's stressing out. And it's just not needed. With intentional unschooling, you have the flexibility to go in and out of things as life happens. We're not going to stress out. We're going to get to it when we get to it. We're going to do school, quote unquote, we'll call it education. We're going to do education 365 days a year, 7 days a week, right? Because we're always learning and we're always looking for those opportunities to teach them more. We have a lot more of that because they're actually at home. When we see they're genuinely interested in something, that's when we jump in. That's the flexibility of intentional unschooling. Then we provide a ton of resources. Our job is also to expose them to a whole bunch of things that they might be interested in, and they may not, and they can come back to it later. We may get a book, it gets tabled, that's fine. We may come back to it later, and that's what we're finding out with our children, is they eventually want to come back to it and learn it because there's something in there that piqued their interest, or they know that this is something that's going to stand in the way of getting something that they want. So all of a sudden they're going, yeah, I think I should probably learn this. And one of those meta skills that I like to try and have my kids absorb, I don't know the word I'm looking for, but internalize, is intrinsic motivation and the ability to critically think about what in the future do you want, how you should get there, and then actually taking the action to do that. And this goes to the example of me learning math in like 3 weeks, three grades of math in 3 weeks. I was all of a sudden motivated, and I did it. I didn't need to spend 3 years stressing 5 days a week with my mom getting on me about it, and that would have been a waste of time. I learned it in 3 weeks. So we in our family with intentional unschooling allow for that flexibility, because we know one day they will see need. And if they don't, I hope, again, when we strive for these meta skills, I give them the tools to be able to teach themselves with the stuff that I missed or they missed. Because I certainly have a curriculum in my head that I want them to learn that I think would be beneficial. But if I try and force them to do it, I will make them hate it. And I know that. So I don't do that. But I want my kids to read. I want my kids to write. I want them to know math. I want them to know science. I want them to know history. I want them to know all the stuff that the schools advertise that are going to teach your kids. I just don't think they do it because of the way they do it. Moving on. Addressing common misconceptions about unschooling. All right. Unschooling does not mean no structure. You've probably heard me say it a million times in this episode, but I don't see any problem with having a structured curriculum within unschooling. If your kids are interested in it, go ahead and do it. I think it's, again, a very fast path to success. We just need it to be tailored to the child's needs. Unschooling doesn't neglect essential knowledge, and this is another misconception. It instead delivers when it's most impactful. It's all about timing. It's all about flexibility. It's all about you as a parent doing your job to try and get them interested in stuff that you know they'll need, pointing out where they're going to need it, how they're going to need it. They're going to eventually have to learn something about this, how it's getting in the way, or making it super interesting and fun. And those are, hopefully you're doing all these things. We're trying to get our kids to learn what they need to learn, but oftentimes it's very practical stuff because that's actually what they need to learn, and they need to master some of that stuff. The practical math, the practical history understanding, the practical technology lesson, all these things they're going to be very well versed in. And then we're going to expand beyond that when it's most impactful, when they're interested in it. And we're not going to stress out about that. But we are going to cover those essential topics because our job is to get them interested in it if we can. One of the ways that I get my kids interested in stuff, let's say history, for example, that might be a hard one for some parents, but my kids are super into history. We talk about world events. We're watching the news and we see something on TV and they go, why would they do that? The great question. Why is there a war in Ukraine? Why is Russia involved? Why is the United States involved? There's some context within there. There's history. And I go, well, it goes back to this, the Cold War, the this. And we start talking about it and then we're interested in it. I've used video games in the past. This might be a little controversial because some parents, especially within Christian circles, don't like violence in their video games. I don't know. I was in the Army, and simulated violence, to me, as long within reason, I should say, isn't. I grew up with violence in my video games and in the movies, and I don't think it made much of an impact on me. I don't want grotesque stuff, and I don't want to go on a rant here about this, but I did let my kids play, or my oldest play Call of Duty, and I made it to where there's a setting you can change to where it doesn't show all the gross stuff. It's, you can make it really gross if you want to. But that game we really just did the online stuff is really what it was. but there were settings that they would go to in the games that have historical significance. They would put little things out there that have this historical significance. That actually got my son interested in history. And that was my intent. And I said, now we're going to go back and learn about World War II, which is what the Call of Duty game was centered around. I got to say, I don't know if this is the right approach because it is a very violent game. But I decided to take the risk because I just didn't think, at least for my son, it was going to be that big of a deal. And it wasn't in retrospect right now, but I wouldn't recommend that to everyone. Either way, it did get my son interested in history because he's like, oh, that makes sense as to why, there's female snipers that are only Russian. It's like, oh yeah, that's in World War II. A lot of females who were in the combat arms were snipers. Believe it or not, women make better snipers than men because they just don't. Their heart rate doesn't pound as much, and knocking them their aim off. And that's one of the reasons they did that. And we got to learn about that when we would watch these history documentaries. So pretty cool stuff, kind of merging everything together. Moving on. Let me see. My computer's moving slow today. I got to scroll here. Let's go. All right. How to balance interests and practical needs. All right. So introduce concepts that align with your child's natural interests, but also cover practical skills. Okay? Sometimes you might pick up a curriculum and then just put it down. You might not finish it. You know what? That's okay. You want some follow through, of course, but I would not make them learn it, quote unquote, learn it at the expense of now hating the topic and never coming back to it. Okay. It's a balance, right? Balance their interest and practical needs. They might need a break, and that's fine. We're human. We all need this. I suggest, this is what we do in our house, framing subjects like math or history in terms of real world applications, like how they can better understand the world with a historical context. They can better understand the world with understanding math, and they can better function. They can make better decisions, pointing out where it limits them. All these things can help them see how they need to learn this stuff. And then you can get them interested in that topic or interested in it again to come back and finish that curriculum out. I think that the role of parents in unschooling, which is the next thing I want to talk about, is as a guide. You're going to walk with your kids. You're not going to force them. It's not top-down instruction like schools do, where I'm the teacher and everything I say is right. I think we should learn with our children. Some things you're going to teach them. They're going to ask you a question. You know all about it. Go ahead, teach them. Other times, it's going to be maybe a summary, and then you provide resources, like a ton of resources on it, like a curriculum, if they're really interested in a topic. And I would only use that if it was something that they're actually interested in. But it gives them the opportunity to explore at their own pace, especially with younger children who don't have full access to the internet. A curriculum gives them the ability, or even a textbook gives them the ability to learn something and just explore around and find stuff. Maintain engagement by offering choices while respecting their autonomy. We're looking at I'm still waiting for my oldest to memorize the times table. As soon as he does that, we're going to get the Synthesis app to learn more about math. He really wants to learn more about math in an engaging way that does that. So this is a choice that they have. If you want to do this, it costs X amount per month. If you show me you are truly interested in doing this, knock this out, knock out your times table, and then I'll do it. If you to show me your commitment, because I don't want to pay a subscription fee and him not be engaged. And they have curriculums out there where you can learn a lot of different topics on a subscription model. I don't think it uses necessarily AI, but there's some companies I'm investigating, and I'll let you know if I end up doing it and how it goes. But right now, we're still working on the times table. He's just very slow at working at. We're learning all the way up to 15. That's the stipulation to get the synthesis app. It's a little bit more than even I learned. I don't even know up to the 15s, but I just told him, if you want this app, this is what you got to do. He already knows up through the 12s. Maybe I'm pushing a little too hard. I don't know. To be determined, but I think there's probably some value in that to be able to do that mental math really fast. And I'd like to set him up for success. So that's what we're doing. But our role as parents in unschooling is to provide those resources. And keeping a bunch of books around available, having a bunch of documentaries in the queue, or learning historical context, I don't know, a bunch of documentaries on different things that they might be interested in, or finding channels that just continue to teach kids like how things work, I think is a great one to explore. And, that might get them interested in physics. Some hands-on projects that we can do with our kids, or just unleash them to do on their own. I think there's a lot of stuff out there that we can do as parents. Again, we give them exposure to different things that they might be interested in. They show an interest in something, and then we provide resources so they can learn, whether that's us, a curriculum, or just one-off things, Might even just be time with us to learn more. Moving on. The problem with one-size-fits-all education, and this is how curriculums work, rigid curriculums. You send your kid to school, and it's one-size-fits-all education. It's an exception to the rule if it is something else. One-size-fits-all approach assumes all children learn the same way, at the same pace, and are interested in the same things, and probably actually doesn't assume that they're interested in it. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if they're interested. They're going to learn it. Labeling kids as behind or ahead undermines the confidence of the kids. I just see a ton of problems with this. And everyone's got a unique learning path. Everyone's built differently. I remember how arbitrary these things that I learned in school were, and it's just like, oh, I'm going to be learning this in this grade, and it's like, okay, whatever. Why do I need to learn this? I'm never going to use it again. Like these arbitrary things that I really don't. I think exposure to it's probably good, but getting my mental wheels turning is probably good, but I don't think it's good at the. It makes kids hate it if they're not interested in it. I just don't think that's worth it. So, anyways, the one-size-fits-all approach really just undermines the love of learning. I really do believe that, and I just don't think this rigid curriculum approach is working. We've been doing it for 100 years. It's not working. Moving on, cultivating a love for lifelong learning. Well, don't use a rigid curriculum. That's number one. I think unschooling is a great approach, especially with the young ones, and really anyone, because you can always introduce a curriculum with what they're interested in. I think unschooling ignites a passion for discovery that can continue into adulthood. Self-motivation replaces external pressures like grades and tests, and I think that's critically important, because one of the meta skills I want to instill in my children is self-motivation. In the future, the majority of the U.S. workforce will be freelancers or entrepreneurs. It's about half right now. That, to me, says they need to be self-motivated. Even if you're an employee of someone else just doing the regular 9 to 5, being self-motivated is going to separate you from a lot of other people who are just listening to whatever their boss says and just doing whatever they are told. And no more, no less, bare minimum standards, right? The same standards we have in school. As long as you get a C, you still graduate. And then they continue that into their careers. And I don't think that's a great way to set them up for success. I think we should set them up for success by building that internal motivation. And how do we do that? I wish we could do that by forcing them to learn certain things, but it doesn't work that way. When we force them to learn, we're literally telling them it doesn't matter what you want. And their intrinsic motivation just sits there idly waiting and then eventually dissolves, and they're always waiting for top-down instruction. That's not good. Not in a free market. Not if you want a productive society. No. You want someone who's intrinsically motivated, who actually cares, who's interested. Think about your doctor. Do you want your doctor to hate being a doctor? No, you want him to be intrinsically motivated to help people with their medical problems and whatever it is. If you go to the specialist, let's say you have a breathing problem, you go to a specialist, you want that specialist to really care about what they're doing, to have an intrinsic motivation, to be internally motivated to fix that problem. That's what I'm looking for. I think the best of the best have this quality, so I want to instill that in my children. How to incorporate a curriculum effectively. So, again, we want to use a curriculum as a resource, not as a mandate, and introduce new ideas. Okay, we're going to expose our kids to a whole bunch of different stuff, find their interest, and then give them the resource of a curriculum to do. Let children choose the materials that resonates with their interest. Let them find something that works for them. That's what you do, right? When you Google something to learn about it, you're going to find something that works for you. And I think that is really the key. Find something that you're interested in, that they're like, yeah, this is what I want. My boy wants synthesis. All right, we'll do synthesis. Put a little stipulation on that because I don't want to pay $30 or $40 a month, whatever it costs, but unless he's really interested. So I'm going to make him work a little bit. And here we go. And I'd say that's a loose curriculum. I'm not sure exactly how it works, but it does walk kids through ideas using AI for math particularly. And lastly, what I want to talk about is some actionable tips and resources for you guys. So, 1, encourage curiosity by connecting learning topics to real-world applications. That's one of your jobs as a parent, okay, as an intentional unschooler. You want to make it very tangible to them, something that they see the need to learn something, right? Especially, I shouldn't say especially, particularly important with stuff that they will actually need. Don't fool them. Use curriculum as a flexible tool to supplement your child's interests. It's a resource. It's not a rigid structure, and it's not age-based, and it's not any of that. It's a resource to learn something, and that's it. There's no ahead or behind. So avoid labeling children ahead or behind and focus on progress for them instead. The only thing you can compare yourself to is the past you. If you compare yourself to the past you and progress happens, high five, you're making progress. And that's all we can expect, right? Research open-ended curriculum options that adapt to different learning styles. I think that's kind of cool. In 2025, we have a bunch of technology that can do that kind of stuff. It's not just a textbook and lectures anymore. It's apps with AI, and it's engaged, well-done historical stuff, and pretty cool stuff out there. Leverage local and online resources, including like libraries, museums, maybe even virtual communities, or even communities within themselves. We participate in a local homeschooling group called Archers, and Archers meets every 2 weeks, and they actually have a curriculum, but you can choose your curriculum. So I have my kids choose of the options. They sign up for it, and then they do it. They got stuff that they can do at home, but it gets them engaged. It gets them someone else teaching them, and I think it's a really great thing. And again, they're using a curriculum. We're teaching teens. We have to participate as a part of this co-op. And so we're teaching teens financial literacy, which I think is really good. It's a very practical thing. And just basic adulting is the other class, which I think is a pretty fun thing to do, because those teens are about to be on their own, and they need to know how to do this stuff. So in conclusion, curriculum can be a helpful tool in unschooling when used to support a child's interest. Forced learning undermines engagement, competence, and retention. But fostering our curiosity and flexibility in timing creates lifelong learners. So with that, I'll end today's episode. So stay curious, stay unschooled, and stay away from the algebra nightmares. I'll catch you in the next episode. So here's where we roll up our sleeves and bring out the big guns. If you support our mission, then please leave a review. On Unschooled Unleashed, we are talking about using a radical approach to education in today's world, and the more 5-star reviews we have, the more people will feel comfortable with the ideas, strategies, and principles we discuss. It gives legitimacy to our message, and the podcast's algorithm prioritizes us so we can reach more people. You may even have your 5-star review read on our podcast. Before I let you go, I have to pause and say this from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. Your presence here is the fuel that ignites this movement. I am incredibly moved that you trust in us enough to click play. You, my friends, are the caped heroes in this story, the guardians of your family's learning journey, and a beacon of hope for your community. Be bold. Do what you think is best for you and your family. Thanks again for tuning in and taking this courageous leap outside of the box for this educational revolution. Welcome to the front line.